just give us an indication of maybe your touring squad that you're travelling over? Maybe just...
Basically, Ken, in a nutshell, same sort of guys who played last week. For a lot of reasons. I think I'd like to give them an opportunity to build on what they did last week. I think when they've played, they've sort of got to know each other a lot better under pressure. And also, just we played Leinster last year, played them in the semi-finals. We had to come back and play in Cape Town. The travel of coming back and the, sitting economy class tickets, etc., etc. Yeah, I just felt we learnt a lot from that last year. So we got Stormers next Friday night. There's no ways we can fly via Doha, arrive tomorrow evening 6 p.m. and then fly Sunday and arrive here Monday, sort of leave the hotel Sunday morning early and get here sort of midday Monday and expect us to be ready for the Stormers game. So, yeah, taking nothing away from the fact that we respect Exeter, taking nothing away from the fact that, that we got to make sure we're on our best for Stormers as well. And obviously on a high that we played so nicely with this new group of players. So there's a lot of things, Ken, as I said, without disrespecting Exeter at all. It's about making sure we do what we think is best for our group. We'd like to do well in both competitions, but I'm also a realist. I think to understand, Ken, and I think people need to appreciate, for you to win the Heineken Cup or the Champions Cup, it means on 3 consecutive weekends you have to beat Toulouse, Leinster and La Rochelle on 3 consecutive weekends. Now, I don't want to be a defeatist, but I can tell you, be realistic. Do we have the squads in South Africa that can match La Rochelle, Leinster and Toulouse on 3 consecutive weekends away from home? Because we'll have to play away. That's just because of the participation agreement. So saying that, that doesn't mean you go into every game saying, look, it doesn't count. Doesn't say that you say URC is more important at all. Winning for us, and you know me well enough, Ken, to know that we want to win as many times as we can. But I think, to be fair, there's no ways that if you're looking at elite sport, that a group of players can fly around the world now, economy class, play Exeter away, and then fly all the way back around the world and play Stormers, who are the URC champions, the following week. It's nothing to do with the fact that one is more important than the other. It's about using the resources you have that are at your disposal. So that's the first thing. And the other thing, Ken, Exeter have to come to us in January, and it's going to be 40 degrees here. And they would have come out of their winter. So it's going to be a daunting task for them to come here. And then maybe I'll play my strongest team at home. And then it means we would have beaten Leon and Exeter if we beat them here. And then we still get a fair crack of making the top 16, which is, I suppose, the first thing you've got to do is try and make the top 16 to keep yourself alive into the knockout stages. So, yeah, Ken, I hope I answered your question. I think people would expect that. But if we, saying if we had a week off next week, maybe then we would, not maybe, then definitely yes, I would take the guys and give them a game. But I just think, I said it last week, and I'm sure maybe people don't quite understand, but SA Rugby and my players have given us a mandate, and the mandate is we can play our players 32 times a year. Now, if you play 13 test matches, that means you can only use your player for 19 games a year. Now, if you include, there's 21 URC games, and then there's four games if you don't go further in the Heineken Cup or the Champions League, and then I think there's 15 or there's 16 or 17 Currie Cup games. Now, that means you've got to be very clever and very smart about how you use your players, because as you can imagine, 32 minus test matches into those 3 competitions doesn't add up. So yeah, as I said, I'd love to take my main guys. I'd love to go and measure them and evaluate them against a team like Exeter that have won this competition 2 years ago, and are a really good, difficult team to play against. But I think the planning that we always initially had with the draw that we have and the games we play. I said to the guys the other day, we play this game away, Then we play the next week away against the Stormers, then the next week away against the Sharks, then the next week away against the Dragons, then the next week home against Exeter, then the next week Leon away, and the next week Scarlets away. So, I mean, you do your own sums. There's enough pressure and enough travelling and enough away games for this group, other than taking them on another excursion or another game away from home at Exeter.
Like, having said all of that, and I fully understand, how do you make all things equal then? Is it a case of more money for bigger squads, better quality players, but then also perhaps you should have a block where it's only Champions Cup games and not have 1 week Champions Cup?
No.
In Super Rugby, it was only Super Rugby.
No, look, I must say, Ashfaq, one of the nice things about, and all the overseas teams have it, is having this in the middle of your competition. It is a great thing. It is. I mean, it's a different vibe. It's a different competition. It's a different pressure. So I don't think you're ever going to get away with this is a block of URC. This is a block of, of Champions Cup. This is a block of Test matches. This is a block of Currie Cup. Unfortunately, there's not enough weeks in the year for that to be earmarked in different areas. So the excitement of playing another comp in the middle of another comp is part of the management that you have to have. I mean, you look at teams. Well, I'm not the only coach who's doing it. All the other coaches have, I looked at Toulon. Toulon played away this week at Zebra. They now play Bath at home. I'm almost sure the team will be completely different, and that will just show that you've got to balance quickly and cleverly about how you put your squads together. But to answer your first question, Ashfaq, I look every week. I read about the Saffers that are doing well overseas. And if we could have those Saffers into our 4 regional teams, the Andre Liebenbergs and the Jason Jenkinses and the Raymond Rules and the Madosh Tambways and the Ivan van Sales and you go through it, the Jacques Vermeulens and all those players, the Eli Sneymans playing at Leicester, and the list just goes on and on and on. If we could take those players and bring them into the 4 regions, that's where we were 10, 15 years ago. That's where we were. Those players were all playing for the 4 regions or the 4 Super Rugby franchises. And sometimes we've got to learn from history, Ashfaq. If you want to compete at this level, and I said it just now to Ken, do you really genuinely think, Ashfaq, and I sent you a couple of text messages, do you genuinely think that our squads are strong enough to beat Toulouse in the quarterfinals, La Rochelle in the semi-finals, and Leinster away from home in a final in 3 consecutive weekends? Then I've got to tell you, then either you disconnected from reality, or there's going to be a lot of luck that's needed for that team to back up, considering he's also playing Currie Cup and considering he's also playing in the URC, and it'll be the back end of the URC competition. I would be amazed if any South African side will have the firepower to, one-off game maybe, you can maybe beat a top side, but to consecutively back it up week after week after week at the end of a long season and play 3 teams that have got a budget of 180 million rand as opposed to 70 million rand, I think we're kidding ourselves, and that's where we got to get to. So going forward, we're going to have to find ways in which we keep those Andre Liebenbergs and those Jason Jenkinses and the Archie Sneymans and the Pollards and all those guys back in South Africa, because that's the only way we will get be able to fight a gunfight with a gun.
Morning, Coach Jake. My question is about some of the performance over the weekend. Your Bernard van der Lindes, Spongi Lenovugas, and players of that sort. Does it complicate selection matters now moving forward? I mean, you speak about main guys and these guys, now they're earning European experience, and they will say, I played well against Leon.
Yeah.
And if they play well again against Exeter away, what happens then against the Stormers in the URC the following week?
Yeah.
Specifically, a guy like Bernard van der Linde.
Yeah, Sabu. So, I mean, let me answer the first question you said, does it make it difficult? No, it makes it bloody easy, because, I mean, at least now I've got more players in my team, so... And the second thing is, I mean, I would rather talk about easy as in Navuka. Hasn't played rugby for a year. He tore his pec muscle against the Lions in January. 11 months later, he's playing against Fijian French wingers that are playing in European Cup rugby. Now, a lot of things that get positive about that, Sabu. Means the rehab's been fantastic for him. You know, the off-season in terms of where we put him back on the field from a staff and a rehab point of view is spot on. I mean, the coaching that he's been given to actually play at that level 11 months out of the last game is phenomenal, you know. And what it does do, it gives me an opportunity now to try different things. I mean, if he gets confidence playing against Leon and now Exeter, I mean, I asked him just now, does he know who Jack Knowles is? And he probably didn't know who Jack Knowles was. I said he wears a Red Bull scrum cap and he plays wing for England with lots of tattoos. So, I mean, for Izzy, he's that's what's so nice about these youngsters, you know. But saying that, I mean, the point I'm trying to make is there's nothing to get him to not play in the next couple of games. If he's on fire and he's enjoying his rugby, and then we just. By the time we get to January, Izzy, we'll probably have, Sabu, we'll probably have an interchangeable of both groups together. You know, now just from a travelling point of view, it's probably one or the other. And, I would love to get to when we're back in full song to have a mixture of both teams together then. And then we'll be in a great position, you know. I just need you to understand, Sabu, it's you guys that said the other group, not me. I mean, you guys are the ones that are talking about the other group. So... yeah, at this point in time, there's no one here that says there's A and B team. There's a group there's one group, and there's a group that's been selected to play the next 2 weeks and maybe the next 3 weeks. You know, maybe the only thing is the travel. Maybe this group will play against the Sharks again. You know, let's see what happens.
Still on Bernard van der Linde, coach. You haven't said a word about him.
Yeah, I deliberately haven't because Zach du Plessis and Ambrose Papier have played really well as well. You know, and to be fair, he played really well. But if I remember correctly, I mean, the one time we were stopped 1 meter from the try line and he just had to put the ball down. And the other one was, I think, half a meter from the try line and he just had to put the ball down. So we mustn't get ahead of ourselves. I mean, he played nicely and he's definitely a guy who's keen to get involved. But, hey, you know, Zach's played really well and Ambrose has played really well. So it's a great position to be in. 3 halfbacks and then Keegan, who came off the bench as well, played really nicely as well. So... you know, it takes one injury, Sabu, and then all of a sudden you're pushing someone else's button, you know. So, you know, it's not. I'm happy that after a long layoff, but I mean, compared to Navuka, he played in the Varsity Cup. The other Navuka never played from January. So, and again, a guy like Jacques du Plessis as well, never played since 11 months. So, there was a lot of other guys that we can be positive about as well. Not taking anything away from Bernard. But he gets another chance this week. Now he plays against an Exeter team that are, you know, at their place. It'll be good to see how he can back that up.
Just final one for me, Coach. You spoke about like the players that are overseas, the staffers that are doing so well. But to be able to overhaul your team and still put out that sort of performance in Europe against Leon, the Challenge Cup champions, you know, what does that say about the depth that you have got? But specifically, we've seen changes in the Stormers as well. We've seen the Lions compete. We don't have many Springboks.
Yes.
What does it say about the depth that we have in-house? Yeah. And how do we harness that depth enough so that it can get the requisite game time and they can, you know, enhance the level of rugby in South Africa as a whole?
Okay, so I'll give you a quick summary of what should happen. All I hear about is the great depth, and if we had those other guys here, then these players wouldn't be playing. It's absolute nonsense because that happened 50 years ago. I mean, we still had depth, we still had good schools, we still had guys. What's going to happen is the tier underneath is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. So in the Currie Cup, if you think about it now, sadly, it's probably going to be an under-21 competition, which is sad, really sad. And there's more than enough games to play Ruan Nokia and RG Snyman and Louis de Jager and Jason Jenkins at the Bulls. There's more than enough games because you can play and Janku Swanepoel and Ruan Vermaak. I'm using those names because they're all Bulls players. It doesn't mean you lose out because if you want to be high profile in URC, high profile in Champions Cup, high profile in Currie Cup, which is what we really want to try and get to in South Africa, then those players should be playing for one region and interchanging with each other. You know, it's easy to say, and you're right, a guy like Ruan Nokia has been outstanding. My question is, how much better would he have been if he played with RG Snyman in certain games? How much better would he be if he had André Liebenberg scrumming with him as well? How much better would he be if he had Wilco Low in the front row with Malcolm Marx scrumming at hooker? I mean, that's where I think we miss a trick as well. We mustn't in isolation say, yeah, but there's juniors coming through and that's why it's good for the seniors to be overseas. I just think there's a baton to be handed over, Sabu. And the baton to be handed over is also part of the experience. And, so I mean, I think having coached in Australia, having coached in Japan, having coached in France, we will always produce rugby players at big boys schools. We will always produce rugby players in a country like this where rugby's our national game. That will never ever change. We will always lose players to other countries like VPNL or Piers Kuman or whatever. That happens. But I do think that if we want to be playing in a competition like the best club competition in the world, which is one step down from Test rugby, and that's the Heineken Cup or the Champions League, like football, then you need to have the bigger, stronger squads. You can't have a diluted squad and think that you can dominate in Europe as well. That's just my view from a franchise coach. I think, as I said, the budgets are completely and utterly distorted. You know, our budget in Rand is 1/3 of the budget of those European clubs. Leinster, Montpellier. You look at those clubs, I mean, there's no ways we can compete. You know, they need a wing. They bring in George Bridge from New Zealand at Montpellier. So, and then you say, yeah, but we produce youngsters through here. Of course we do. But producing Navuka, which is a fantastic, nice story for us, is very different to bringing in George Bridge to come play wing for you in the Champions League.
Coach Jake, Johan Torres hier van Radio Rugby, Coach. So vanaf van die Currybeker. So I just want to find out, in terms of the Curry Cup for 2023, is there any news at this stage as to when it will kick off?
Yep, I'm sitting at my desk, Johan. I mean, I basically got it. We start the second week in March, it's round number 1. And it runs through to the Curry Cup final, which is the last week in June. So there's 14 rounds, which is 7 teams home and away. And then you play a semi-final and a final. So there's 16 Curry Cup games, which these players will be expected to play. And at the same time as that, there are URC games that will be running at the exact same time until the end of May. That's when the URC finishes. And then there's obviously the Heineken Cup, depending on how far you go, that runs in between that as well. So yeah, that's where we are. So that's why I can share that with you, Johan. It's a lot of rugby to be played between, obviously between now, because we've got these 7-8 games, and then a little bit of time off in February, and I say a week or two, depending on how you progress in the Champions League. And then we kick off with a Curry Cup from the 11th, the weekend of the 11th of March until the weekend of the 24th, I think it says here, of June.
Thanks, Coach. Yeah, so that will obviously influence your preparation as well, because we need to get the cup back in Pretoria. So, as you mentioned, with the two, currently with the two groups, possibly a third group coming in.
100%, Johan. 100%. I think what we need now is we need another group, because we there's no ways that, with injuries and with, and I suppose with injuries and 3 competitions running at exactly the same time, you not only need teams to play, you need teams to train against. So, one of the things we're looking at from a Bulls point of view is bringing in a third team of players that we can actually train against and use, maybe not the whole team, but use players during the Curry Cup.
I know they're probably going to write a book after this one, but I want to touch on the game itself and the team that you're taking with. I know we're going to get the press release just now. What do you expect from this team going up against Exeter? What is your real expectations? I mean, most people in South Africa would say you're going to go there to win and you never go there to lose. But what is your expectation of this team that you're taking to Exeter?
Jan, Sonny, I just had a meeting with him this morning and I said, it's -5. It's one of those grounds you just don't win at Sandy Park. I think Nazam said in all the years that he played in England, he played 5 times there and they never won once. So he just said it's such a tough place to play. They were champions 2 years ago. I mean, they've got internationals almost in every position. And so what I'm expecting is what I told the players. I'm expecting us to roll up our sleeves. I'm expecting us to actually embrace the fact that we're going to a place where it's going to be tough. And and it's always nice to play in front of your home crowd in the sun. It's always nice to sleep in your own bed. We're going to travel, as I said, around the world. We're going to get there tomorrow night. It's going to be freezing cold. We're going to have one training session on Thursday. And then we're going to have to stand and make sure that we're ready. So I suppose what I'm expecting from us is just I'm expecting us to give it as good a shot as we can. No one gave us a chance last week at home against Leon. And the one thing this team has done since I've been here is every time they've had a challenge, they've accepted the challenge and they've not only accepted it, they've often achieved it. So this, as I said, people always talk, sports people and coaches always talk about it doesn't get tougher than this. Well, as a club team traveling like we are on the back of where we're going against who we're playing, generally it doesn't get tougher than this at club rugby.
Touching on these young players or the group that you're taking, some of them are not so young. What is the learning experience going there? I mean, what's the learning value going to be on Saturday?
Yeah, and look, I mean, they are young. I mean, if the average age of that group's probably 22, 23, I mean, obviously the age looks a bit, when you've got Jacques van Rooyen and you've got Mornay and Bismarck, all of a sudden the age profile looks a bit different. But generally, they're youngsters. And I want those senior guys to actually help these youngsters learn about pressure. Well, I want them to teach them about what it's like to be a professional rugby player on the tough days. That's it, Jan. These are tough days. Big expectation, playing a big team. Crowd is phenomenal at Sandy Park. And so as I said, my sort of my wants out of this weekend is we just give it a fair crack. We stand our man. We give it as good as we can. And we learn from the pressure that's going to come. As I said, you look at how many teams travelled this last weekend and got nothing out of away games, and there were some good teams that went away. So it's going to be, for me, it's going to be a fantastic opportunity for young guys to grow and experience what it's like to be a professional player in a pressured situation. I send my players, every guy's joined to a club here, so he plays at Pretoria Rugby Club, or he plays at Harlequins, or he plays at Nakabilla, or he plays at Centurion. And the reason for that is on Thursday nights he's got to go to training and see what it's like to be a rugby player that's not always training at 10 o'clock in the morning, always training on nicely groomed pitches. And this is no different. This is about a young boy coming into a group, going off to overseas, and experiencing what it's like to be a professional rugby player in a pressure situation. And that's basically it. But taking nothing away from the fact that we must give it our best shot.
Last week's game, if one is critical, the guys let Leon back in the game.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the match.
Yeah.
Obviously did really well to still win. But and obviously it was a great learning experience for the guys last weekend.
Yeah.
What were the key sort of things that you spoke to the team about in terms of learning from last week's game?
Yeah.
That they can take forward to Exeter.
Yeah. So Ken, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the bottom line is I don't think we deserve to lose. I mean, that's the first thing. And we almost created a situation where we ended up losing. And I said to them, I don't think we deserve to lose. I think we did enough to win that game. But what it did teach us is that even when you think you've done and dusted and you've won it, this level is it's a completely different level, So that was the first learning, that I think we must never underestimate the fact that at this level, it's not other teams don't go away. They're going to keep coming at you. So that's the one thing. The second thing is, that's probably why I'm picking the same team, Ken, because I think they need the chance to actually feel what it was like to be under that pressure again. And I'm saying it because they learned from that. They learned what it was like. And, Ken, I just go through it again. Sebastian Lombard's 20 years old, tight head. Jan Hendrik's 21, hooker. Janko Swanepoel's 22, lock. Reinhard Ludwig's 20, lock. Pierre Steenkamp is 22, flank. Bernard van der Linde is 21 or 22 now, wing. Keegan Johannes, 21, scrum off. That means 7 of those guys were in that pressure situation. 5 of them forwards, Ken. No, I don't think that you can do a training session and ever replicate that kind of pressure on youngsters coming into a senior team. And that is where I think we can grow as a group. That now they're going to feel pressure again, away from home, massive crowd behind them, great team with loads of internationals. And also, Ken, having seen how the Bulls played, I can imagine that Exeter would have said, "Shit, boys, we better get this right," So there's going to be. I don't think there's any way that Exeter will come into this game feeling as though it's sort of an easy outing, which again puts more pressure on these guys going into a game like this. So, other than the technical things of missing a few tackles, other than allowing 2 more tries against us, I mean, obviously we talk about those every week. I would just say the learnings for us, Ken, is we almost found a way to lose, and that is sometimes disappointing. And that is the thing we need to make sure we don't create this weekend.
It was just updates on Sheep and Marco's injuries.
Yeah.
And then also just about Exeter's back three. Obviously, a guy like Stuart Hogg there, huge threat, Jack Knowles. There's definitely some players you have to be careful of.
Yeah, look, Brendan, so first thing, those 2 guys, one has had an operation yesterday on his hand, Jacques. It went quite well. I saw some of the pictures. The surgeon did a really good job on one of the bones. There's a bit of a couple of screws and pins in there, so hopefully, we're looking at about 5-6 weeks. So hopefully by the middle of January we'll get him back. And then Marco's going to go hopefully into tonight or tomorrow. That answers that question. And look, you talk about the back three. Obviously it's not just the back three at Exeter. They're one of those teams. They won this tournament 2 years ago. They got unbelievably, good coach in Rob Baxter. He's been around for a while. He has a hell of association with the club. His parents, his dad coached there. So, they've got a lot of continuity and understanding of where they want to go as a team. They've got great identity, and they've got some great players. They can, one thing about them is they're very good in your 22. They finish, and also they can play you from the halfway line by hanging onto the ball for like 20 phases. So, they're going to be a completely different test to what this group's used to. Obviously they had patches of it against Lyon on the weekend, but I think at home at Exeter, having won for the first time in 11 years in Cust, I think that's the first time Cust have lost at home in 11 years, and Exeter have got it right. So, I think there'll be a lot of confidence in the Exeter group, and obviously the understanding as well is that they're playing at home, and they've got an opportunity to jump up the ladder and give themselves, a great chance for a home playoff game. So, it's a big test for us, Brendan.
Hi, Jake. Thanks for explaining so laboriously how stuff works, and I really appreciate it. For the first time, I really get a picture of what's going on in Blobeland and Fort Loftus and stuff around there. But having said that, and I've listened carefully to you, it's not a new phenomenon that you're in. When you started off, you also highlighted the fact that there's young guys coming in, and you've got the older senior guys and the guys with leadership, etc., etc. And you've highlighted that again here with this group and with this at this stage, as well as with the URC. Obviously, guys like Mornay and Bismarck, just to pick out 2 senior guys there, 2 Springboks, 2 guys that have been around the block many times, they will continually play a vital role in your group. I've seen that in the game on the weekend. That's the first part of my question. And if you could elaborate a little bit about that and that dynamic. I know I've written down the word tough here, how many times that you've used the word tough. So if you could elaborate a little bit on that, I'll have a little. I've got two other questions after this.
Okay, so yeah, Simon, thank you, man. So they are very important for me. They play mentor roles. I mean, those junior players look up to them because of the experience they've got. You know, funny enough, yesterday I was having a discussion with another provincial coach who feels as though he loses players from his small union and thinks that us big unions are not in the same position. We don't understand the stresses of smaller unions losing their players. And so I wrote down in the last year and a half of guys that would be playing for us now if they'd all stayed. And we would have had Trevor Nyankani, we would have had Jason Jenkins, Walt Steenkamp, Marco van Staden, Marcel, Arno Botha, Ivan van Sail, Madosh Tambwe. So imagine if I could have hung on to all those players in this group as well. And so as I said, every coach has got his challenges. And that's why when you get guys like Mornay and Bismarck that are coming back and sharing that kind of experience, it's worth gold to me. You know, it's gold that on the field they can handle the pressure, they understand what's coming. The little youngsters that look up to them, even literally look up to them in their eyes and look to see what body language they have in those big games and in those pressure moments, Simon. So, yeah, that's the kind of thing that I'm looking forward to this weekend is a lot of young boys. I haven't picked my team, but a lot of young boys will get a chance. And they've got to make sure that they learn from these experienced guys who've played in Europe and played overseas and played Test rugby.
Jake, a little bit towards the real rugby aspect of the game as well. And I was watching the set pieces over the game as well. And especially towards the end, you have made mention of that. You said you nearly were in a position of losing the game. Set pieces, especially at your lineouts, there were some frailties coming in there, and stuff that the team put themselves basically under pressure. Obviously, that's going to repeat itself, and you want the players to, for the lack of a better word, to be in that cauldron, to experience that and to improve from that.
100%.
Obviously, you have worked towards that. You have spoken to the team. Do you foresee that this week they will be better?
Yeah. So, Simon, I mean, again, you're repeating everything I've always said since I've got here. There's no other way I can give a Sebastian Lombard a pressure situation like he had on the weekend. You know, when I moved Jan Hendrik to hooker, there's no ways you can throw week after week in a line out on the side of the field or to a lollipop that's there with a net and think you're going to do it in a game situation when pressure's on. So 100% right. I think there were some frailties, but as I said to you, 5 of your forwards are 22 years old or younger, and they're playing against a side like Lyon that are 4th on the log in France and are champions last year of the Challenge Cup. Well, then that's what happens. You know, that's the pressure you've got to come through. And you know, I'm just fortunate, and I said I'm fortunate as in the Bulls are fortunate that we got a win after going through that experience last weekend and a 5-pointer. That just makes the week so much easier. But getting back to this weekend, it's a different challenge altogether. -5, snowing, field covered till Friday apparently. They're going to take the covers off on the Friday. You know, traveling 24 hours to get to our destination, 4 hours on a bus. I mean, that's it. Then we're going to have to roll our sleeves up on Saturday afternoon and see how good we are, you know.
Perhaps this one, tongue-in-cheek, on your way back and you pick up your old pal Eddie Jones.
Yeah, I don't know if he's in Exeter anymore. He's probably in Japan now.
Hey, Jake, how's it going?
Good, thanks, Ali.
Nice to see you. Just a quick one from me, and I appreciate you've been over a lot of this ground, but it's a kind of broad question about South African involvement in the Heineken Cup, because everybody's been excited to see what the various teams can bring, a little bit of extra glamour, obviously a lot more broadcast money, etc., but attendances looked pretty bang average in South Africa in round one. That they weren't unique, by the way. I was in Swansea and it was, broadly very, very poor in terms of crowds. Is coupled with what you said about the logistics and coping with the fixtures that you have on your plate in the next week or two, is it kind of madness to think that actually a South African team could win it, and therefore is it kind of crazy that we're even experimenting with this? The travel and everything along with it it's very complicated. Your teams were supposed to be bringing an extra pep, an extra spice to a tournament that seems to have kind of lost its way, and now we're wondering whether actually it was worth it in the long run. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, okay, Ellie. So I'm going to give you a bit of a history lesson as well. Is when we started Super Rugby, we used to go on tours for 4 weeks. We never won a game. South African sides complained that it's a hell of an unfair disadvantage because we fly for 4 weeks. We play 2 in Australia, 2 in New Zealand, sometimes 3 in Australia and 1 in New Zealand, or other way around. But it took time, and eventually we got the model right. And the Bulls won 3 Super Rugby titles, and I think the Lions got to 3 finals, and Sharks got to, I think, 1 final or 2 finals. So the point I'm trying to make, over time, the lessons got better and better and better, and I think we ended up understanding how Super Rugby worked. Okay, so that's the first thing. I think also the crowds in the beginning, we had Super 8 and then we had Super 10 and we had Super 12, and they were provincial sides were playing originally. It was like Otago versus Northern Transvaal, and along the way became franchises. And so again, crowds were a little bit sort of, why is it franchises and not unions and old school, provincial unions, etc. And so I suppose what I'm saying to Ellie is this: is that I don't think the South African public understand fully about the Champions Cup, and I'm not saying that because something that we've never had, So, and so I think now the first couple of weeks are, it's toe in the water stuff. I think they're trying to see what it's going to be like, and I think once they see, hang on, but this is the pinnacle of club rugby. This is where, as I said to you, you've got to be good enough to, in this competition. I've looked at the draw, but this year you would have to, on 3 consecutive weekends, beat Toulouse, La Rochelle, and Leinster. Now, I mean, Leinster got 2/3 of the team that beat the All Blacks. I think you've got La Rochelle, who were champions last year, that have got internationals almost in every position, and a pack of forwards weighs over 1,000 kilograms. And then you've got, as I said, you've got Toulouse, that they say is the strongest French team with all the sort of personnel they've brought in. Now, I mean, there are not many club teams, that can go 3 consecutive weeks, play Toulouse, La Rochelle, and Leinster at consecutive weekends and win it. So, not to take anything away from the fact that one would like to see it and one would like to believe you can. But I think South African public will see as that tournament gets to the end. I remember watching it one year in, I think they played the final in Barcelona, and I think Racing Metro played Toulon, if you remember that game, and Racing got a red card, and early on in the game, and I think they had 100,000 people watching it in the Camp Nou that year. Now, when this public starts to see how massive this thing can become, and how massive it does become, even without South African sides, I think there will be a groundswell from the public to actually start supporting it. I think, I don't think you can read anything into the first weekend into whether this is going to work or not. I think there's a lot of water under the bridge still that will get to the highs of the Bulls winning the Super Rugby competition.
Yeah, that's good to hear, because it sounded like, if I just came cold into this, and it seemed like, you're quite downbeat about South African chances, quite understandably, for all the reasons you outlined. And I just wondered whether it added up to a rather bleak and gloomy future for the tournament as a whole, which kind of still needs to re-establish itself. It had its glory days. And
Ellie, so let me tell you, I know it does sound like doom and gloom, but I think that those are the lessons we got to learn. If we genuinely want to win it, then we need the guys playing abroad to come back and play at our franchises. I mean, if you took all the South Africans that are playing in this competition out of all the foreign teams and put them into South African teams, I can tell you now, it would be a completely different competition. I can tell you that, And that's why, wearing my South African hat and my Bulls hat, I'm saying, geez, let's hope we can get to that stage. Let's hope we can attract some of those players back to South Africa to play for these franchises. So it's not doom and gloom at all, in that I don't think it can ever be done going in the future. All I'm saying is we need to be mindful of the fact in the current situation of playing URC, Currie Cup and Champions League with the squads we have and the budgetary constraints we have. I mean, there's a reason why big teams in football that spend the most on players are at the top of the log. There's a reason why top French clubs that are spending the most money on top of the log. There's a reason for it. You know, every sporting code is like that. So, you know, we're going to have to find a way, and I'm not saying it can only be the money. Maybe we've got to find the patriotic way of getting our players back here to want to play for us in this big competition and obviously compete with South African sides.
So short of patriotism, it kind of is cash injection or a massive currency boost, right? Because where the rand is at the moment and what big French teams can offer, that's always going to be a big problem.
But patriotism, but patriotism works. You look at Ireland and New Zealand. Patriotism works in rugby union. It's an incredible thing to understand, but it works in rugby union. Ireland, I think, are number one in the world, and they don't have one guy playing abroad, and they've got a small player base compared to other countries. And I think New Zealand have got the second least amount of rugby players, and in the last 15 years or whatever, they've dominated world rugby consistently, you know, in everything, in whether it's Super Rugby or national team. So for me, patriotism works. There's no reason why we want to try and reinvent the wheel. Young boys want to play for their countries, no matter what the sacrifice is. Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. Safe travels.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks.